The Blueprint for Black Power, Chapter 1, Influence as Power. Influence occurs when a person acts in compliance with the wishes or directions or suggestions of another based on his sheer positive regard for love and admiration of the other, or based on a desire to please or serve the other because of the other's personal significance to him. Influence is achieved when the subject's behavioral compliance is attained without the influential party having to possess or use force, coercion, material rewards, or making appeals to authority. This is especially the case when the subject complies with the wishes, suggestions, or commands of the other while engaging in no relevant, independent, or deliberate thinking, reasoning, or rational processes whatsoever, or when the subject complies out of a conditional habit of obedience in regard to the other. Wartenberg mentions two important types of influence with which we are familiar: rational persuasion and personal persuasion. He also mentions a third, expertise, which we discuss as competent authority presently. In the first instant, the subject retains the use of his critical or rational faculties, but is led to reassess his understanding or perception of a situation or of reality, or to accept as reasonable or correct the conclusions reached and recommendations suggested by the other as the result of the other's apparently logical argumentation or reasoning. In the second instant, the subject's behavioral compliance, the argumentation, or demands of the other occur essentially because he wishes to satisfy the desire of the other as he perceives them to exist. As Wartenberg posits, quote, the central feature of influence via personal persuasion is that the influenced agent does not make her choices on the basis of reasons that she can present in the form of rational argument, but rather on the basis of the desires of the influencing agent. End quote. Another form of persuasion might be referred to as propagandistic persuasion, wherein through various media and forms of indoctrination techniques, the subject is influenced to accept certain opinions or beliefs which lead him to think that he is acting in his own interests when this really is not the case. Influence as power involves the power holder's ability to gain his subordinate subjects' voluntary acceptance of and behavioral compliance with the power holder's interpretations of reality, value judgments, prescriptive suggestions, and commands based on the power holder's perceived status, resources, personal, social attributes, competence, expertise, or legitimate authority. When power holders as a group possess a monopoly of the positions of influence due to historical and other social factors, they may use their influence as a means to secure and obscure the possessions of other types of power, and at times render unnecessary the naked use of force and coercion. Influence requires that the subject subordinates his judgment to that of the other, that he is guided by the judgments of the other. As such, influence is a more secure and hidden form of power, in that the influenced subject complies with the demands of the power holder either without questioning the role or motives of the power holder, or after being persuaded by the power holder's apparently logical argumentation. Consequently, influence as a type of power, as a type of rational, personal, propagandistic persuasion, may serve to render the possession and exercise of other types of power unnecessary and more secure, or to obscure them altogether. Thus, influence may itself function as an exceedingly potent or subtle form of power. To a very significant extent, white domination of blacks, which initially and until relatively recently was expressed in terms of physical force coercion, the threatened use of force along with its occasional use, now expresses itself as influence. By means of the various forms of influence we have discussed, Whites dominate blacks without appearing to deliberately do so and without having to revert to their sheer use of force and coercion. Consequently, they convince or persuade many blacks to behave in ways compatible with maintaining white power and incompatible with generating black power, while blacks self deceptively think that such behavior on their part is purely voluntary, reasonable, or obligatory. This situation devolves from blacks having accepted Eurocentric frames of reference and perceptions of reality. Only by choosing to accept and live by an Afrocentric frame of reference will blacks escape the dispowering white influence and correspondingly enhance their own power.